Now we are going to look at the definition of the quadratic polynomial. So as in the previous classes you have already studied about the quadratic polynomial. Suppose that Px is a quadratic polynomial, then when we make the polynomial equal to 0, then we get a quadratic equation. So if Px is a quadratic polynomial, then Px is equal to 0 is called a quadratic equation in variable x. This is a simple example, simple definition you can write for the quadratic equation. Now we are going to study the general form of the quadratic equation. Now the general form of the quadratic equation can be written as, or you can say that another definition of the quadratic equation can be written as an equation of the form ax square plus bx plus c is equal to 0, where a, b, c are real numbers and a not equal to 0 is called a quadratic equation in variable x. So it is said to be the general form of the quadratic equation. When you look at the general form of the quadratic equation ax square plus bx plus c is equal to 0, that means you can find that in the left side of the quadratic equation is a quadratic polynomial. This is a quadratic polynomial, and when you make the quadratic polynomial equal to 0, that means you have a quadratic equation. And when you look at this quadratic equation, then you can find that the coefficient, the maximum power of this quadratic, maximum power of the variable is taken as 2 for the quadratic equation. Now the question can be arised in the mind of the equation, mind of the student, that where from this word arise, quadratic word कहाँ से आया? तो अगर हम देखें तो देखते हैं कि ये जो क्वाड्रेटिक वर्ड है, क्वाड्रेटिक वर्ड इज कम from the word quad, and the meaning of the quad is square. What does it means? The meaning of this quad word is square. The meaning of this word quad is square. This quadratic word, it comes from the word quad, and the meaning of the quad is square. And here we have taken the maximum power of the variable in this quadratic polynomial as 2, and it is read as x square. Now we can, when we look at this equation again, then we can find that the coefficient of x square, the coefficient of x square is a coefficient x square is equal to a coefficient of x is taken as b, and since this term contains no variable, that means it is said to be constant term. And the constant term is c. When we say c as the constant term, remember student, in the general form always after equal to you have to write 0. जब हम यहाँ 0 पुट कर देंगे, that means अगर इधर 0 के अलावा कोई भी दूसरा रियल नंबर है तो उसे हम सबसे पहले लेफ्ट साइड में इक्वल टू के पहले सेट करेंगे और इस साइड 0 क्रिएट करेंगे, और जब 0 यहाँ आ जाए तभी यहाँ पर जो कांस्टेंट टर्म आएगा, यहाँ पर जो भी रियल नंबर आएगा उसे हम कांस्टेंट टर्म के रूप में यहाँ पर लिखेंगे. So it is a general form of the quadratic equation. Now suppose that we consider some example here. Now look at this example. This is the example of the quadratic equation. So when you compare the quadratic equation with the general form of the quadratic equation, then you can find that a is equal to 5, b is equal to 3, and c is equal to 6. So we can write here, for this example, for this quadratic equation, coefficient of x square is equal to 5, coefficient of x is 3, and coefficient of Now we can say it is the constant term. So the constant term is taken as 6. Suppose that we want to change the sign. Here we want to put -3. Here we want to put minus sign before 6. Then what we can write the coefficient of x here? The coefficient of x can be written as -3, and then coefficient, the constant term can be written as -6. Suppose that in the third case we can take here we want to write 7. Then we can say that this is not the general form of the quadratic equation. In the general form of the quadratic equation, you have to write equal to 0 after equal to. That means at first you have to set this 7 before equal to, and then you have to make it as a general form. So when we send this 7 here, then the 7 become here -7 equal to 0, and then the equation can be written as 5x square minus 3x minus 13 is equal to 0. In that case, the constant term get changed, which is equal to -30. So this is the example of the quadratic equation. When you look at the another type, now the general form of the quadratic equation can be read as the standard form of the quadratic equation. When we study about the standard form of a quadratic equation, then the standard form of the quadratic equation is written as the same as the general form of the quadratic equation. So when a quadratic equation is said to be in the standard form, when the term containing the power 2, मीन्स वह टर्म यहाँ मौजूद होना चाहिए जिसमें वेरिएबल का पावर 2 हो, वह टर्म भी मौजूद होना चाहिए जिसमें वेरिएबल का पावर 1 हो, और कांस्टेंट टर्म भी यहाँ मौजूद होना चाहिए और आफ्टर इक्वल टू होना चाहिए. तब हम कहेंगे कि क्वाड्रेटिक इक्वेशन अपने स्टैंडर्ड फॉर्म में है. दैट मीन्स डिग्री 2 वाला टर्म भी होना चाहिए, डिग्री 1 वाला टर्म भी होना चाहिए, और कांस्टेंट टर्म भी यहाँ पर होनी चाहिए, और पावर जो है डिसेंडिंग ऑर्डर में एस्टेब्लिश करने होते हैं. मीन्स पावर 2, पावर 1, पावर 0. यहाँ पर वेरिएबल का पावर 0 है. दैट मीन्स स्टैंडर्ड फॉर्म करने का मतलब हो गया डिग्री 2 वाला टर्म, डिग्री 1 वाला टर्म और कांस्टेंट टर्म तीनों यहाँ पर मौजूद होने चाहिए. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, when we write 5x square plus 3x plus 6 is equal to 0, then we say that this equation is in its standard form. Now in the next video we are going to study about the types of the quadratic equation.